I never expected my life to change at an Italian restaurant on a Saturday afternoon. We were celebrating my son's birthday, or at least that's what the invitation had said. Casual lunch, just family, the text read. I'd picked out a pale blue cardigan, the one my late husband used to say made my eyes look like the ocean. I'd even brought a gift, a custom engraved watch I had saved up for despite my fixed income. The restaurant was crowded, the kind of place with red checkered tablecloths and Frank Sinatra crooning faintly from the speakers. I remember the smell of garlic and roasted tomatoes. I also remember how my daughter-in-law barely looked up when I arrived. She didn't offer a hug, not even a smile. I sat at the far end of the table, not by choice. The seat closest to my son had already been taken. A glass of water and untouched bread plates saved the spot for her mother. Fine, I thought. It's not about where I sit. It's about being here. But something felt off from the start. Whispers. Side eyes. My grandson, 5 years old, kept glancing between me and his mother like he'd been warned. I smiled through it, made small talk with my niece, who seemed just as uncomfortable as I was. I asked about school, about soccer. No one asked me anything. When the food came, I reached for the basket of rolls and accidentally brushed my daughter-in-law's hand. She pulled it away like I'd burned her. Then she stood up. I remember it in slow motion. She picked up my plate, spaghetti with marinara, my favorite, and hurled it down. It shattered. Right there, on the floor of Mama Lucia's, in front of waitstaff and strangers and family, she screamed, "Witch, you should have never come." The room went silent. The manager came running. My son didn't. He just stared at his lap like a scared little boy who wanted to disappear. Someone handed me a napkin. I wasn't crying yet. I was frozen. My daughter-in-law kept yelling. Something about me manipulating the kids, about how I was always playing the victim. Words that didn't match the woman who once asked me to help plan their wedding, or hold her hand during her second pregnancy. I looked at my son again. Still nothing. Not a word. Not a defense. Not even a glance. I slowly got up, careful not to slip on the shards or sauce. My hands were shaking. I picked up my purse, the watch still inside, and walked out without saying a word. Outside, I sat on the curb in the sun. I didn't know whether to laugh or vomit. What just happened? This was the woman I'd welcomed into our family, the one I'd defended, even when she banned me from helping with the baby, claiming I was too old-fashioned. The one I had kept peace with, for him, for my son. And he let her humiliate me, in public, in front of our grandson. Something shifted in me, sitting on that curb. The part of me that still hoped, still prayed for a warm reconciliation, it crumbled. All I could think about was how often I'd been silent for the sake of keeping the peace, how often I'd bitten my tongue so he wouldn't be caught in the middle, how I'd swallowed my loneliness every Thanksgiving when I ate store-bought turkey alone while they vacationed in Florida. And now this? I don't remember how I got home, just that the cardigan came off the moment I closed my front door. I dropped the gift on the kitchen counter and stared at it like it was mocking me. The silence of my house, once comforting, now pressed against my ears like punishment. I turned off my phone, let the voicemails pile up. I didn't want to hear it, the apologies, if there were any, or worse, excuses. That night, I opened the old photo albums I hadn't touched in years. My son's kindergarten photo, his high school graduation, his wedding, I had framed that one. He looked so proud, so kind. Where had that boy gone? I didn't cry until I saw the picture of him holding our first family Christmas ornament. We'd painted it together. He was 6. That's when the tears came, not just from the pain,
but from the quiet realization. Something inside me had finally snapped. But not in the way people think. It wasn't rage or bitterness that rose up. It was something else. Something that had been waiting, watching, patient, and now it was awake. People look at women like me and think we're fragile, soft-spoken, smiling, gray hair in a bun, cardigans and church potlucks. But they never see what we've carried, what we've buried. I was 21 when I had my son, married young, like most of us back then in small-town Pennsylvania. My husband worked construction. I took on shifts at the grocery store and cleaned houses on the weekends. When our second baby came, I quit school. I'd been taking night classes to become a nurse, but childcare was too expensive, and we needed the money now, not later. I told myself I'd go back, someday.
Instead, I learned how to stretch meals on a budget, how to turn hamburger helper into 3 nights of dinner. I clipped coupons religiously, shopped clearance racks, patched jeans at the knees. My hands always smelled like bleach or meatloaf or Vicks VapoRub. When my husband got sick, stage 4 lung cancer, I became his full-time nurse, changed his bedpans, bathed him, read him psalms when he couldn't sleep. The kids were teenagers by then, but they barely came out of their rooms. I didn't blame them. Hospitals scare everyone, even when they're in your own living room. He passed on a cold January morning. I went back to work 2 weeks later. Bills don't stop when grief knocks. I remember cashing in my wedding ring at a pawn shop once to help pay my son's first semester at Temple University. He never knew. I told him I had a small savings bond from my parents. It wasn't true, but I needed him to believe the world would meet him halfway if he worked hard enough. That boy had big dreams. Business school. He interned at a bank downtown. I remember packing lunches for him even then. Homemade sandwiches, little notes tucked in. Proud of you. Don't forget your umbrella. Love, Mom. He'd smile, a little embarrassed, but he always ate the sandwich. When he met her, the woman who would later scream at me in public and break my plate like I was garbage, I welcomed her with open arms. She was polished, professional. Everything I wasn't. I baked her banana bread, helped them move into their first apartment. I even co-signed their first car loan when the dealership said they didn't have enough credit history. That was a mistake, of course. They defaulted on the payments 2 years later. I had to dip into my retirement account to cover the balance. But I told myself, it's family. You do what you have to do. So I did. I babysat when their first child was born, even though my knees were bad and I was still working part-time at the library. I cooked them casseroles, mailed anniversary cards, tried not to flinch when she corrected me in front of others. Actually, we don't let him have screen time. Or, no offense, but we don't use that kind of language with our kids. No offense. Always those 2 words, like a wet rag thrown at my dignity. But I bit my tongue, again and again. Because that's what we do, right? Mothers? Grandmothers? We stay soft. We say, it's not about me. We convince ourselves that shrinking makes room for love. But love shouldn't require disappearing. Looking back, the signs were always there. She'd make plans and forget to include me. They'd go on trips and post about them online. Disneyland, Colorado, Jamaica, always with her family. Her mother, her sisters. Never me. At Thanksgiving one year, they didn't invite me at all. Said they were doing something, just the 5 of them. My son sent me a text with a smiley face and a turkey emoji. That was it. So I roasted a small chicken, ate it alone while watching Wheel of Fortune, pretended it didn't hurt. But it did. God, it did. Still, I kept showing up. Birthdays, school concerts, every event I was allowed to attend, I came with a gift and a grateful smile, like a dog waiting for scraps, until the restaurant, until the plate, until she called me a witch. People think betrayal is loud, screaming, fighting,
But the worst kind, the real kind, is quiet. It's when someone looks at your love and treats it like it's worthless, like you're disposable. I've spent my life giving and giving and giving, and somewhere along the way, I forgot that I'm not a bottomless well. Even wells run dry. That night after the restaurant, I sat at my kitchen table and made a list, not of groceries or chores, but of the things I'd let slide, the ways I'd abandoned myself in the name of love. It was a long list. I poured a cup of tea, wrapped myself in a quilt I'd sewn back in the 90s, and whispered something into the dark of my living room. No more. Not with anger, not with spite, but with clarity. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is leave the door unlocked and walk out. It's funny how quiet strength feels nothing like the movies. There was no dramatic packing of suitcases, no yelling, no ultimatums. Just a single morning in March when I looked in the mirror and no longer recognized the woman staring back. Her eyes were tired, her posture too polite, her silence too heavy. That morning, I made 3 decisions. 1, I would not attend my grandson's piano recital. Not because I didn't love him, I do, but because I wasn't going to keep showing up just to be ignored, to be tolerated. 2, I would cancel the $300 monthly transfer I'd been sending my son to help with groceries. He hadn't asked for it lately. He just expected it, like clockwork. No thank you, no check-ins, just another unpaid bill I paid on someone else's behalf. 3, I would block my daughter-in-law's number. Not because I was angry, but because I was done being available to someone who only called when she needed to scold, correct, or accuse. You don't need to announce your boundaries to make them real. I just stopped responding. And the silence didn't feel like punishment, it felt like oxygen. The first call came that afternoon. My son. Hey, Mom. Did your bank mess something up? We didn't get your usual transfer. I paused, not out of hesitation, but out of calm. I said, no mistake. I've decided to stop sending it.
Dead silence on the other end. Then, well, we budgeted around that. You should have said something. I didn't realize you were still budgeting around my retirement check. He huffed. It's not like that. Then what is it like? I asked. Because I've been giving quietly for years, and all it's done is make me invisible. Another long pause. I'm in the middle of something right now. Can we talk later? I smiled without humor. You've had years. And I hung up. It felt like slamming a door, but not out of rage, out of preservation, out of survival. 2 days later, my daughter-in-law left a voicemail. Sharp, performative. I heard you're punishing the family financially now. That's really low, even for you. You're hurting the kids. No mention of the restaurant, no mention of the plate, or the insult, or the public humiliation. Just guilt, just blame. I deleted the message. The old me might have called back, tearfully, trying to explain, trying to make peace. But I'd learned something. Peace doesn't come from pleasing people who profit off your silence. I didn't go to the recital. I sent a small card with a music note sticker and the words, I'm proud of you. Keep playing. No money, no apology, just a simple truth from a grandma who needed time. Days turned into weeks, and that's when the texts started. Are you okay? You're being really distant. This isn't like you. But it was. It was exactly like me. The me I had buried under years of giving, apologizing, and shrinking. The me who used to have dreams, preferences, and boundaries before I learned that motherhood often meant turning yourself into a service. I joined a quilting circle again, the same one I dropped out of when I started babysitting full-time for my son. We laughed about thread tension and gossip from the church bulletin. They noticed my eyes looked brighter. I went to the farmer's market, bought flowers just because, took a ceramics class and ruined my first vase, and still smiled. My world didn't collapse when I stopped giving. It expanded.
Of course, the final push came one evening in April. There was a knock on the door. My son. He looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was just standing taller.
I opened the door, but didn't invite him in. "I didn't know things were so bad," he said. "I thought you liked helping." "I did," I said, until it became the only reason anyone kept me around. He shifted uncomfortably. My wife, she says you've turned your back on the family." I met his eyes. "No, I've turned my back on being mistreated." He looked stunned, maybe even hurt. But here's the truth. Being honest with your child after years of self-sacrifice doesn't make you cruel. It makes you whole. He asked to come in. I told him, "Not today." He left quietly. No shouting, no slamming doors. Just silence. And me? I closed the door, breathed in, breathed out, and felt taller than I had in decades. 3 weeks after I turned off the money, skipped the recital, and stood tall in my own silence, something unexpected happened. I got a card in the mail. Not from my son, not from her. It was from Chloe, my granddaughter's best friend from high school. She's in her mid-20s now, working at a daycare, living with roommates in Baltimore. The card was simple. Handmade, with a watercolor flower on the front and her familiar bubbly handwriting inside. "Mrs. K, you always made me feel safe in your kitchen. Just wanted you to know I think of you every time I bake banana bread. Sending love." No agenda, no guilt, just kindness. I called her the next day. She picked up on the first ring, and after the usual catching up, job, pets, a funny story about one of the toddlers she cares for, she asked quietly, "Are you okay? You seemed quieter the last time I saw you." I laughed a little. Quieter or invisible? There was a pause. Then her voice softened. "I've been meaning to tell you this. I remember being 15, sitting at your table while your daughter-in-law whispered that I wasn't on your level. I don't know if you heard, but I did. And I saw the way she looked at you. It was like you were the help." I felt my throat tighten. She continued, "The way you've shown up for people your whole life, it mattered. It still matters. But it's okay to stop showing up where you're not respected." There it was. Truth from someone with no stake in my performance. Someone who saw me when I didn't even realize I was being watched. "You know," I said slowly, "I used to think being needed meant being loved." Chloe let out a breath like she'd been holding it too. "I think a lot of women grow up believing that," she said. "That if we just stay helpful, stay small, stay quiet, we'll earn our place. But what happens when people stop needing you? Or when they never say thank you?" I looked out the window. The tulips were blooming. "You disappear," I said. "But you didn't," she replied. "You didn't disappear. You just returned to yourself." That sentence hit me in the chest. We talked for almost an hour about little things like cinnamon and banana bread and old church songs, but underneath it all was something sacred. She saw me, not as a martyr, not as a wounded elder, but as a person who had done her best and was finally learning that best doesn't have to mean endless. That night I wrote in my journal, the same leather-bound one I'd tucked away years ago after my husband passed, the same one I used to fill with grocery lists and PTA notes. I wrote, "Being needed is a job. Being loved is a gift. I've been working overtime for people who never intended to pay me with love." It wasn't bitter, it was clear. Chloe reminded me of something I used to know before I traded it in for maturity and sacrifice and doing the right thing. That you can be kind without being passive, but you can offer love and still have a lock on your door. That boundaries don't break relationships, they reveal the truth of them.
The next morning, I went to the pantry and pulled out my old recipe box, the same one Chloe used to dig through as a kid, looking for cookie ideas. I picked a recipe card with faded ink and sunflower doodles in the margins, banana bread, and I baked. For no reason, just because. The smell filled the house: cinnamon, nutmeg, sugar, and something else I hadn't tasted in years: peace.
I poured a cup of coffee, sat by the window, and whispered to no one in particular, I don't need to be everything for everyone anymore. I just need to be real. The voicemail came 2 months later. Hey, Mom, it's me. I know you probably don't want to hear from me right now, but things aren't good. She's talking about moving out, says I should have stood up for her more. I don't know what to do. I miss you. I listened to it once, then deleted it. Not out of anger, but because I finally understood something I never had before. I am not the solution to other people's storms. I am not the mediator, the fixer, the emotional sponge. And if you only call when your life is falling apart, what you're reaching for isn't love, it's rescue. I don't rescue anymore. The world didn't end when I chose myself. It simply shifted. Yes, they stopped inviting me. Yes, there were holidays I spent alone. But being alone and being lonely are not the same thing. For the first time in years, I sat through Thanksgiving without pretending I liked the food or the company. I made my own meal: roast chicken, garlic green beans, and my favorite cranberry sauce. I lit a candle, played music, even danced in my kitchen a little. Freedom doesn't always feel like fireworks. Sometimes it's the quiet joy of setting your own table. I saw my grandson again in the spring, not through his parents, but through his school. I was still listed as an emergency contact, and when his mom couldn't be reached after a minor bike accident on the playground, they called me. He looked taller, braver, but still had that dimple when he smiled. I brought him home, gave him a snack, let him rest on the couch with an ice pack on his knee. He didn't ask where I'd been, just looked at me and said, I missed your banana bread. I smiled. I missed you too. He asked if I'd be coming to his birthday party. I told him gently, I don't think I'm invited anymore, honey. He looked confused, then a little sad. But he nodded. Kids understand more than we think. I'll save you a piece of cake, he said. And that was enough. I've joined a women's book club at the community center. We meet every other Thursday, trade novels and stories about the lives we used to lead and the ones we're quietly rebuilding. I started painting again, too. Just little watercolors, nothing fancy, but it reminds me that creating something doesn't require anyone's approval. I even opened an old savings account under my own name. Not joint with anyone, not for emergencies for the kids, just mine. A small declaration. I exist. The woman I was 2 years ago wouldn't recognize me, and that's okay. She got me here. She endured. She kept the lights on, and the peace kept. She survived what others called normal, but what was, in truth, a slow erasure. I don't hate her. I thank her. And then I let her rest. Last week, a neighbor asked if I ever regretted cutting off my family. I didn't correct her. People like clean stories, villains and heroes, right and wrong. But I said this: I didn't cut anyone off. They just stopped showing up when I stopped bleeding for them. She blinked, then nodded slowly. We're all carrying something. These days, my joy is smaller but deeper. Morning coffee with cinnamon, the chirp of birds,
A text from Chloe. A card in the mail from a woman I used to babysit who just became a mom herself and says she hears my voice every time she sings lullabies. No big victories, no courtroom showdowns, just a quiet reclamation. I don't need to win. I just needed to leave. Not out of hatred, but out of hope. That maybe someday my absence would be louder than my sacrifice ever was. And if not, that's okay too, because I'm no longer waiting for their apology to begin my healing. Healing began the moment I realized being loved should never cost you your dignity.